This is the Spurscast with your host, Paul Garcia.
And welcome back to another episode of the Spurscast. In today's episode, I'll be joined by Project Spurs writer Collin Reid. We'll discuss the Spurs at the All-Star break and the Trae Young rumor. Let's go and jump right into this episode with Collin. Collin, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Really excited that we're coming back from the All-Star break. This is like the stretch time of year. It's also the time of year where I feel like historically bad teams have gotten a good amount of wins, and it makes people think, oh, maybe they weren't as bad as we thought. So, hopefully we have more competitive games to watch throughout the rest of the year. But, I'm really excited. I mean, this isn't Spurs specific. I'm so excited about the playoffs this year. Like, there's so many good teams and so much of that kind of. So I'm excited that we're entering the stretch run of the NBA.
Yeah, and one of the things that's actually piquing my interest, I actually looked up the date when it starts, is the March Madness tournament for college, just because I know the Spurs could potentially have 2 lottery picks here if they get the Raptors pick. And so that's actually something that I do want to kind of watch a little bit more of, is kind of getting a little feel for some of the prospects. Because I did watch a bit more college basketball last year just because we didn't know for sure if the Spurs would get the number 1 pick. So I kind of wanted to have just a little bit of knowledge on some of the other players in that draft. And so that's definitely something I'm going to tune into. But I do want to begin first, Collin, by kind of diving into the Trae Young rumor in a different kind of avenue here. So what I want to first begin with is clarifying a contract detail that I had an error on in the last Spurscast episode. So basically a week ago, I had said that that Zach Collins couldn't be traded for a whole year up until like October 22nd, 2024. And the reason why I had said that is because I had read an article by Bobby Marks of ESPN where he had said something about Zach couldn't be traded only at this deadline. So when I went back and reread that article from Bobby, he did say only at this trade deadline. So he didn't actually clarify that it's up 2 years. So that was my fault. And then as I read the CBA, there's all these different restrictions and everything. I had seen something about if a veteran extension contract happens, the player can be traded for a year. Well, then Ty Yeager, who writes for, I think it's for Era Alamo, he kind of just asked me, he goes, "Are you sure that's correct?" And then he sent me some information from Spotrac, who's, very, very, they're usually really good with their knowledge and their contract details. And so sure enough, I went back and reread, and yes, Zach can be traded after 6 months of signing his contract extension. So basically that means that as of April 22nd this year, 2024, then Zach can be moved in a trade deal. So the Spurs don't have to wait to October. And that what that does, though, if you can exclude Zach's deal and a potential Trae Young kind of deal, that does open a little bit more doors than just having to work with only Keldon's salary and maybe Devontae Graham's as the only 2 salaries. So the way Zach's contract works is that we know that if he's traded before July 1st, which is this current CBA year, his contract is $7.7 million. If he gets traded after July 1st, well, then that's when the extension kicks in, when his contract's up to $16.7 million, which is a little bit more to work with if if you look to trade him. Another detail that I missed out on last week on the episode was that Trae Young does have a 15% trade kicker in his contract if he does get traded. And so what that would be for this season, if he gets traded by July 1st, that would be about $2.9 million additionally to his current contract for this season. And we do know that the player can either waive or reduce that trade kicker, as the details, as he gets traded to the team, that he's going to. Maybe if he really wants to go to that team, well, then sure enough, he can work with that with the current team, the Hawks, and figure that out. Again, I'm not saying that any of this is going to happen, but this is just some extra details I wanted to note. So now, opening that door, let's go back to the Trae Young rumor, where the Spurs reportedly had interest in him right before the deadline, and they made some contact with Atlanta. What this does is, before July 1st, the trade deals that I talked about last week could still happen. But so before July 1st, the Spurs can still put Keldon Johnson and Devontae Graham salaries in a contract, in a trade deal, and work to get to Trae's $40 million salary. So that works out. The Spurs can't do like Keldon and Zach or Zach and Graham. That just doesn't work. I've looked at it logistically here. The other deals, if you look after July 1, is Keldon at $19 million for next season. Zach at $16.7 million for next season works to get Trae at $43 million next season. But then again, the Hawks have to answer that question of, do they want Zach on a 2-year deal? Or the other route is to go after July 1st, without including Keldon, you could do Zach at 16.7 million, guarantee Devontae Graham's contract at 12.6 million. That actually doesn't work, is what I see here. So you have to have Keldon if you're going to trade him after July 1 in one of these deals, basically, to make it happen with additional salary like Devontae Graham guaranteed. So just real quick, opening this first door, what are your thoughts? You don't have to talk about those exact deals that I'm just laying out there. Which is, what are your thoughts about the Spurs potentially having interest in Trae Young, especially there at the deadline?
Yeah, so I actually have a lot of thoughts on this. The biggest being, I think that Trae Young is an interesting player because he is an all-star level player, but he's one where, because his weakness is on defense and because some of it comes from his size, it's very visible. It doesn't take like the great analysts out there who are going to say, oh, so and so looks good, but they can't back screen worth the dang, and that makes it hard for that. Whatever. Anyone can tune in and see, oh, the small guy's getting picked on defense. So I think that exaggerates some of his weaknesses. A big thing for me, and it's kind of one of the things I was hoping to kind of touch on with you as well, is just the offensive fit to me seems incredible with Wemby. The idea of someone who's an elite lob passer, an elite passer in general, an elite pick and roll ball handler, people have brought up his efficiency, but he is self-generating these shots, these looks. It's like DeMar DeRozan, except from outside of the arc, and he's never had someone on his team who can pull away the defensive attention. He's had shooters who, people have had to stay home on the shooters, but he's never had someone like Wemby who's going to draw the attention of the defense. And I think Wemby, for his part, a lob finisher, someone who has the best catch radius in the NBA right now and probably the best since the 90s or maybe ever. I just think someone who can bring that attention. I just think that the fit between him and Wemby, and then you are able to shuffle down Devin, where instead of him having to be the guy who's creating the offensive advantage, he can be the one who gets the ball when the offense is already in an advantage state and make good on that, which I think is going to be something where he's going to thrive a lot more in. I think not only that, speaking of the advantage state of a possession, I think the Spurs need a ball handler who can just create an advantage, like put the ball on the court and create an advantage. And they don't have that right now. I think, we are all excited about what Vassell could be, but I think if he ever became that level, it would be a jump that I wouldn't expect. That doesn't mean it can't happen. It's just something I wouldn't pencil in right now. So they need to find that player. And if you try to find that player in the draft, it's going to take 2 or 3 years to develop. And if you miss on that, now you're on Wemby year 4 and you're having to still find that player. Like that is a scary thought versus going out and getting a player who can do that. So I understand some of the people who quibble with the fit here or there, but on the offensive side of the ball, I think it's an incredible fit. And I think that the Spurs could surround him with 4 high-level defenders, and that could mitigate some of it on the other end. So what do you think about the fit?
Yeah, I just think, if right now looking at the current All-Stars, he's like the most if that happens that, him and Atlanta have a fallout at the ending of the season, I think he's the most gettable All-Star. And that's why I think that if you are the Spurs and you do have a lot of interest in him, I think you do got to be aggressive. Plus, the teams you're competing with to trade for him, the Spurs can basically, they have more assets than those teams. If it gets into a bidding war, I think they have like, I know the Lakers are one of the teams. They have maybe 3 first-round picks that they can move around, those kind of things. And so the Spurs have young players plus some picks as well. I think of fit wise, offensively, like everything you just said there, I think he'd just be incredible. I mean, he's already seen just in the games that he's played against Wemby, he's already seen, oh wow, they missed him on this read, they missed him on that team. Like he can already see in his head in that one game when he gave those comments that I could find this guy, a lot of quick passes. Like he was already saying that at the ending of that last game. Obviously, there's going to be some issues defensively, but I do think Wemby's that kind of player where he can cover some of your mistakes. And yes, you would expect the Spurs to find some defensive players around him to kind of flank him around, especially a guy like Sochan who's just continued to develop on the defensive end. He's one of the stellar defenders out there right now. So I think fit wise, I think he'd be a really good fit. Obviously, there's going to be some issues on defense, but offensively, I think it's gonna make up for it. And again, because like you said, you could go the draft route and hope that somebody hits at some point. It's gonna, like you said, it's going to take some years for that to happen, but that's no guarantee. Or you could wait, for another star to become available, maybe like a Luka Doncic. Again, you got to still continue to play that waiting game. So again, if the price isn't too much, and the Spurs are really eager, and again, Atlanta's ready to move on, I think that this is a good move if the Spurs did want to take that opportunity to go after Trae Young. For this next part of this conversation, I do want to go to one of your tweets from Tuesday, and I kind of just want to get the reaction you got from fans that reacted to you on your Twitter, and then kind of just give me if you want to expound some more on this tweet. So on Tuesday, Collin tweeted this. And I'll put it on the screen for those of you that watch visually. Today's hard pill to swallow. If the Spurs were to trade for Trae Young, it will take sending Atlanta all of their picks and swap back, matching salary, and probably another first-round pick or two. That's been the prices of this level of trade for the past 5 years or so. So what were some of the reactions you got back from that tweet?
Yeah, so for me personally, like making fake trades has always been hard because the market is always changing. So one area where I kind of walked away feeling like, okay, I think I actually got this one about right was when Hawks fans were coming out and saying, yeah, that sounds about right. When the Hawks fans are like that and the Spurs fans are like, yeah, that sounds good. Like when both fan bases agree that that's kind of fair, you're like, okay, that might be more reasonable, which I was glad about. There were people, it was very interesting because then you also had the two extremes of people who were like, Trae Young isn't worth this. The Spurs own their draft. They have more leverage than anyone else has over the Hawks. And then there's other people who are like, that's not a hard pill to swallow. Like I would do that every day of the week. Now, when it comes to the Spurs having the Hawks draft, which I do agree gives them leverage, but like this is a competitive team and they have fans and they can't say, hey, 2 years ago we traded for DeJounte Murray and now we just traded our best player for the exact same return. We basically just swapped Trae Young for DeJounte Murray. Like they can't do that as a franchise. They can't do that to their fans. And it's just not like, look at the Rudy Gobert deal, the amount of picks that went out in that, the Donovan Mitchell deal, I mean, there's been so many of these kinds of trades. I mean, even not the one to Boston that happened recently, but the Drew Holiday to Milwaukee in the first place deal. I think it just is the price of doing business. And yes, the most important, if the Hawks are going to pivot, the most important pick to them is going to be their own 2025 first, because that's the Cooper Flag draft.
Yes,
and
that's the one.
Because that's also just like your own picks as a rebuilding team, your own picks are the most valuable ones. But I just don't see how you get an all-star for 2 picks and a swap. Like that's not how it's been at all recently. And I know that there's not a whole lot of teams out there bidding for him right now. But the example I keep going back to is, oh, it's always going to be Miami. It's always going to be Miami with Dame. Like Dame's going to get Miami. They're just playing hardball. They have their offer. They're not going to budge on it. But Portland's going to have a come to the light moment. They're going to trade Dame to Miami because Miami's the only team that has this good of an offer. And then they don't. They trade him to Milwaukee. And we know the two teams right now that have been mentioned being the Lakers and the Spurs. And the Spurs can certainly beat the Lakers offer. But like Kyrie going to the Celtics. I don't ever remember that being even suggested before Kyrie went to the Celtics, or Porzingis going to the Mavs. Like a lot of the times these random teams pop up out of nowhere when these big star trades happen. And I just feel like, Kawhi, I know Kawhi to the Raptors was talked about a little bit before it happened, but like, there's always like, oh, he's probably going to go to one of these 5 teams. And then another secret team pops up, and that's the team that trades for him. I feel like is a pattern we've seen a whole bunch of times. And I feel like you can't, as the Spurs, take that for granted. You try to get the best deal you can, but if you start playing games, like if the Spurs internally think that Trae Young is a good fit for them, they have to like come right to the conversation. Because if they start playing games with the negotiating, they're going to, just like what happened in Miami, like they're not going to get Trae Young. Front offices are competitive and they want to get the best return they can. And I think, human nature, if you feel like someone's not giving you a good offer just because they have leverage on you or whatever, like that does affect your willingness to make a deal. So that's kind of where I was on that.
Yeah, and another team that we didn't mention that I think is a dark horse is like or the Orlando Magic. If they end their season in a certain way, and then they feel like Paolo and Franz are just not enough, and they need like a elite ball handler there, in a point guard like Trae, they can make an offer. And they have a lot of draft assets as well. So yeah, that's an interesting thought. Yeah, that's why I wanted just for you to kind of explain that a little bit more. So that was very interesting that I found you tweeted on Tuesday, and I went to the comments, kind of just saw like, yeah, you're right. A lot of Spurs fans were a lot of them, the majority were supportive of this move. Even though you're losing some future draft assets, and then like you're right, from the Hawks perspective, they do want something back, at the level that they gave up, plus a little bit more.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that I was thinking of is the Spurs can trade Atlanta's entire draft back to them, and 2 additional first round picks and the Charlotte pick. So you just say, oh, it's 5 picks in a swap. They could still, in this scenario, have a pick in every single upcoming draft. Like they would still have 7 picks. Depending on like some of the, like, how does the Raptor pick convey or the Chicago pick convey, whatever, there's all these kind of permutations, but they are so stacked on draft capital that they can have 4 real picks and then a fake Charlotte pick and still have a draft pick in each of the upcoming drafts. So I don't think this is a situation that we've seen before where some of these teams completely lose their draft for years and years to come. They could kind of go for a big move like this and still have draft assets in every single year that they have, the next 7 years. That's how far out you can trade. They could still have draft assets that far out to make another move or to just pick a player in each draft. So I think a lot of the times when we see these Godfather offers, it really cripples the team making them from ever doing stuff with the draft for the next 7 years. And that's just not the case with the Spurs. They can make a big offer and still have a lot of draft flexibility going forward. So that's another reason why I think like you can't, if the Spurs want to get this done, they have to, like I said, come with a deal that makes sense for both sides. They can't be stingy, and they have to understand that, they're not going to roster 11 first-round picks over the next 7 years. You're going to have to move these players at some point, or some of these picks rather, for players to put around Wemby.
Okay. Yeah, no, totally agree there. So let's go to our second topic here, and that's the Spurs at the All-Star break right now. So what I want to do here is I want to kind of go through some of the young players that we expect to be on the team for 1 to multiple years. And I want to just kind of get your expectations on how the player has performed from start of the season to the All-Star break. So we have 3 different rankings here. We have above expectations, we have at expectations, and then we have below expectations. So I'm going to go through just kind of their base stats, and I'm going to go. The list is going mainly on minutes played. So I'm not going by like best players. So obviously we know Wemby's the best player, but we're not going to start with Wemby. We're going to go by minutes per game right now. That's kind of just the easiest way that I put the players in order here. So let's start off first with Devin Vassell. He's averaging 32 minutes a night, 19 points. 4 rebounds, 4 assists to just 1 turnover, 1 steal when you round his numbers, shooting 47% from the floor, 37% from deep, 81% from the free throw line, 7 3-point attempts per night, and 3 free throw attempts. What is your ranking for Devin Vassell? Above expectations, at expectations, or below expectations?
So I was looking through these lists of players and trying to get some of this going in my head. I will say one thing for these young players. I think there's one exception, and I'll mention it when we get there. But outside of that, if we say at as expected, for me, we know that young players are going to grow. So if I say, oh, Devin Vassell, which that's my answer for him, it's kind of my expectation level. He's kind of meeting that expectation level, which still means that he's growing. Like you would expect from last year to this year, he would become a better player in certain areas. And I think we've seen that. But I don't think that growth has been small enough to say, oh, he's playing worse than I expect, or like so big that you're like, oh my gosh, he's way better than I expect. I think, he's following that growth curve exactly like you feel like he would. And so for me, it's as expected.
Okay. I went above expectations just because of, especially lately, like the last 2 months, what we've seen from him is that fact that he doesn't just rely on his shot, night to night. Like we saw in the first few months of the season, as we see for the majority of his career. Even Pop said he's gone up a level in his play where he's learning to, if he's having a bad first quarter, second quarter, he's learning to just go downhill, get fouled, try his best to get fouled. A lot of times refs still won't call fouls for him, and taking to the rack a little bit more, also trying to find some opportunity for his teammates. So that's an element that I think I've seen more growth from him when he runs a pick and roll, not just try to find a teammate or just shooting that mid-range jumper. He's actually like trying to dive in there, and I have seen a little bit more growth than maybe I thought I would see. So that's why he's a little bit more on the above expectations from my rankings here. All right, the next player, Keldon Johnson, 30 minutes per night, 16 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists to 2 turnovers, 1 steal, 45% from the floor, 33% from 3, 78% from the foul line, 5 3-point attempts per game, and 3 free throw attempts. Now, we do note that Keldon was a starter for most of the season. Then recently, within the last month, he got moved to the bench. What are your expectations of Keldon right now?
So Keldon was the one exception to the, if I say as expected, it still means they're growing. I think, and I don't think he's done developing, but I do think we know who Keldon Johnson is as a basketball player now. And I think, to me, it's just kind of as expected in the level of like, we were thinking before the season, he would probably be the one that would come off this bench role. That's eventually where he ended up. He has his nights where, when he really goes off, that puts the Spurs in a really good position. And then some nights where the shot might not be there as much, or the drives aren't working the way that you would expect them to. And he's a rotation player who can do damage on the right nights, and on other nights you don't kind of hear from him quite as much. And it's still valuable to have those level of players. But I think we've learned over the last several years that that's kind of the player he is, and that's just, to me, what I've seen this season. So I would say as expected.
Okay, I'm with you there. I have him as expected, just because for me, it's more he's adapting to a new role that we don't really know how that was going to work. How Wemby becoming the go-to player, plus Vassell now getting more usage than him. That was like a weird fit for him. He didn't quite know where he was in the starting lineup on certain nights. And then now off the bench, at least he knows he can be aggressive. Again, his shot is it looks really good for a few months. And then in a few months, it's like right now, it's really struggling. But again, he's kind of still been a productive player, still been that steady hand for them most nights, even off the bench in this new role. So again, more so as expected. I didn't expect him to be, scoring 20 points a game again. I did see his scoring fall off a little bit just because they're giving more opportunity to Wemby and Vassell. Next player, Jeremy Sochan. 29 minutes a night, 11 points, 6 rebounds, 4 assists to 2 turnovers, 1 steal, 1 block, 44% from the floor, 34% from 3. It's tailed off a bit here. 77% shooting from the foul line, 3 3-point attempts per game, and 2 free throw attempts per game.
So I think if we were back in the summer and you were telling me what my expectation for Jeremy Sochan in year 2 was, and then we jumped from the summer to the snapshot right now, I would say that tracks from where he was as a rookie, getting better on defense, becoming more aggressive in these spots, like where you would expect him to be from year 1 to year 2, he's following that trajectory. So it would be almost as expected from that, not in terms of he hasn't grown, but just okay, he's becoming a better version, a super version of what the rookie was, like the defense on Luka, that first possession of the game, and all throughout the night, that first possession of the game, he is just becoming so good on that end and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of what you would expect to see rookie to sophomore season. But if you asked me after the first 2 months of the season, when he had the point guard experience, and it totally looked like he lost his edge, he lost his confidence. For me, it's way above expectations there because, he is a player who plays with edge. And when he doesn't have that edge, when he loses that confidence, it can be hard for some guys to get it back. It can take a while for them to get it back. And now that we see him playing with that level of intensity again, the fact that he was able to kind of get back into that so quickly, to me, that was above expectation. So I'm going to go with that strictly because of what the first 2 months were. I think this is where I would have expected him to be in the summer, but with how the season started for him, I was impressed that he was able to turn it around mid-season so strong.
Okay, so I have at expectations, but in that same light as you, where it's not his fault that they wanted to experiment and make him the point guard. Again, that really hurt him. It wasn't his fault that he got thrown into that role, but the fact that once he got put back into that power forward spot and he's kind of adapted very quickly, especially defensively, he's one of those lockdown go-to defenders for the team. He's really shown that tenacity. That's where I see his expectations that it's really improved. His 3-point shot, again, it's they're leaving him wide open. It's I tracked his numbers, 80% of his shots are still wide open. But again, at least he's taking them. He's making them at a pretty good clip. I know it's kind of tailed off here lately. And then he finds ways in certain games, not all the games. And again, for him too, it's a tough adjusting to having such a Wemby Devin kind of centric offense. That's a little tough for him. So there are nights when maybe he has 2 points, 4 points, but then there are other nights when he has 16 points. Especially if he can just focus on again when the opportunity is there, trying to get those points in the paint, the closest shot to the rim. Because I know a lot of times he likes to do that post up. That can become an issue. So again, I think for me, it's more so at expectation. I'm not going to say it's below because again, that wasn't his fault that he got thrown into that really frustrating role for him at the beginning of the season, but he's adapted well since going back into being the starting power forward for the team. All right, this next player is probably the easiest answer. Victor Wembanyama, 28 minutes, 21 points, 10 rebounds, 3 assists to 4 turnovers, 1 steal, 3 blocks to lead the NBA. It's actually 3.4 blocks per game. 47% shooting, 32% shooting from 3, though it's tailed up in the last month. 81% from the foul line, 5 3-point attempts, and 5 free throw attempts. What are your expectations of Wemby?
Above expectations. I thought, he was going to come in being an elite high level defender, but the scoring would take a little bit of time to get adjusted to the NBA. The defense was even better than I've expected so far. And the offense has been way better than I would have expected, and the fact that he took a mid-season rookie jump, because normally it's the opposite. It's the other way. I do think that the minutes restriction actually helped him in that way. But it happened. It still happened where he had this mid-season rookie jump, and normally it's the rookie wall. People talk about the rookie wall because his stats weren't as great, but it's still like, but look at what he's still so impactful every single night. And I think Ben Taylor of Thinking Basketball said it best. He's an all-star player right now. He wasn't an all-star this season because he didn't play that way all season long. And the Spurs have the record that they have. But where he is after he took that leap, he is like an all-star level player today. And that is above expectation. I knew that he was going to become that very quickly. I just didn't think by February 21st.
Yeah, no, for me, this is why I said this is the easiest answer on this list. Wemby's above expectations. The fact that this is his floor, 21 points, 10 rebounds right now. Again, the one negative is probably the turnovers, but again, he's young. He's his first time playing in a whole new league. He's only 19 or 20 years old, but he started at 19 years old. So of course you expect those turnovers. He's going to get better as he learns, where defense are swiping at him, where Coach Poppin shows him on film where not to dribble and things like that. And again, leading the league already in blocks. And honestly, I think if he played in the East, he would probably be an all-star right now. As they were making those announcements on the All-Star game, they were doing the pregame kind of thing. I was listening to the players for the Eastern Conference, this player and this player. I was like, man, Wemby's better than 4 or 5. He could have easily made this team quickly if he was in the East. Just the West, as we talked about, is just such a competitive conference. But yeah, for me, above expectations by far. Next player, Malaki Branham, 20 minutes per night, 8 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists to 1 turnover, 43% shooting from the floor, 31% shooting from 3, 93% from the free throw line, 3 3-point attempts per night, and 1 free throw attempt per night, which is basically 0.5. So, what are your expectations of Branham?
So I'm going to say below expectations. We have time to turn it around. I think this is a big test for a player. When they went out of the rotation, the Spurs traded Doug McDermott. He's back in the rotation. Like I said, this is the final stretch. This is when teams sometimes take their foot off the gas, and the Spurs can catch them by surprise. But I think this is a player who came into the rotation as a rookie, which isn't very common for the Spurs team. And I understand that they were really, really tanking last year. But, this is a player who coming out of college, we thought that 3-level scorer who, if you give him the ball in advantageous situations, he's going to be able to score it for you. And I think one thing that really stands out to me is that 31% from 3 and 3 attempts per game. I was thinking, college 3-point line versus the NBA 3-point line, that's a little different. It's going to take him a little bit of time to get acclimated to it. I know he loves that mid-range shot, but I was like I said, the expectation and the hope for me was that he would become that 3-level scorer. And the 3 just hasn't been there. And I think that really has to be there at a certain level for defenses to respect him enough where he's creating gravity on the floor, because he isn't doing that on the other end. He's not. And again, there's time for all of this, but as a sophomore in the league right now, he's just not a plus defender. So I think that he has a chance by the end of the season to get back on track, but right now I would say below.
Okay, I'm with you there too. I have him below expectations. I mean, we saw it with just the fact that Blake Wesley took that backup point guard role from him before Doug got traded. Now he has been playing a little bit better in the last 2 games, Malaki, but I think that he needs to have a strong ending to this season, because if not, I think we could see a younger player like Cedi Sissoko come up from the G League and get some minutes in these final 30 games to end the season. And for me, like you said, it's the fact that you would think of him as a really good shooter just because of his form and everything like that, but he just doesn't. He's shooting 31% from 3. His wide open numbers are a little bit better. And then also in the pick and roll, I thought for sure he'd be that kind of player that's just quickly, if the defense is back off him, it's just automatic, that mid-ranger, and it kind of goes and comes. And then if he doesn't really drive it as hard to the rim and get there on opportunities as well. And then, passing wise, doesn't really create a lot for others. So again, for me, it's he's had a below expectation season. And I think we've seen that just by the proof that Pop actually went to Blake Wesley ahead of him in the rotation. Next player, Julian Champagnie. 17 minutes a night as a starter at the 3, 6 points per game, 2 rebounds, 1 assist to 1 turnover, 1 steal, 1 block when you round out his numbers, 47% from the floor, 38% from 3, 82% from the foul line, 3 3-point attempts, and 1 free throw attempt. What are your expectations of Champagnie?
I think he is a little bit, I'm going to say above expectation, but the reason why is because, like, if we go back to Summer League and you said, hey, this guy is going to be the Spurs starter for most of the season, and he is a little bit, maybe that is like a high job for kind of where he is skill-wise right now. But, at the end of the day, like you said, Pop has been willing to tinker with rotations. Pop has been willing to take guys out of the rotation. And he has been able to hold on to that starting spot. And I think just coming into the season, I just didn't, I don't know, I wasn't expecting him to be that much of a staple in the rotation as he was. I do think, I think this season has had a lot of up and downs in a lot of places, but I feel like he could very easily, and I do not wish this on him, but become like the Bryn Forbes or the Danny Green or that type of player where, their value primarily comes from threes. And if they aren't falling, then people can turn on him pretty quickly because it's like, what is he out there for? But I would say above expectation just because coming into the season, like I said, I wasn't expecting him to have as solid of a spot in the rotation as he had. And so the fact that he's been able to maintain that throughout the season, I know part of that is just the roster construction of the Spurs, but Malaki is probably more important to the future of the Spurs, and Pop took him out of the rotation. So the fact that he was able to maintain that spot to me just speaks to kind of a surprising level from him that I wasn't expecting in the summer.
Okay, I'm going to go above expectations as well, only but barely nudging the ad expectations, only because, like you said, I didn't expect him to be a starter at this point. He's obviously done something that where Pop really wants him out on the floor. That's why he's been able to keep the job there. One thing we know that he does is definitely he opens up the spacing for Vassell and Wemby. I mean, that's the one reason why he's in the starting lineup is even though he doesn't get many opportunities, again, just 3-point shot attempts a game, defenses don't let him take wide open threes. Like, it's rare. So like there's always a defender sticking to him usually. And of course, there's been some plays on defense too where he has a block or two in a game. But there are times though when Pop doesn't really bring him back in games. Like he'll start the first quarter, then he doesn't see the time in the rest of the half, and then same thing for the second half where he plays the third quarter and then doesn't see much time either way. So again, above expectations, the fact that he earned that role, and then more so, I feel like he's not really doing much with it right now. Which again, he's learning. For him too, it's a different role where again Vassell and Wemby get a lot of the usage there. But so I do want to see him be a little bit more aggressive whenever he does get the ball at different times. Next player, Blake Wesley, 13 minutes a night. 4 points per game, 1 rebound, 3 assists to 1 turnover, 1 steal, 52% shooting, 16% from 3, 58% shooting from the foul line, 1 3-point attempt, 1 free throw attempt. I will note a lot of these numbers are very low because he barely started getting these minutes within like the last 15, 12 games, that kind of area. What are your expectations of Blake?
I would say, to me, this is probably the second above expectations, like the highest one behind Wemby, only because I think we had talked about it on the pod. We talked about it several times throughout the summer, throughout the season. Like the summer league that he had there were some moments where you saw the flashes there, but there was also some moments where you saw the difficulties there. And it was like, oof, as a sophomore, you would expect to like run the summer league. And then they came into the season. He's a second-year guard, someone who the Spurs have an investment in developing at a position where they need players, and he's in Austin. And that seemed like, oh, this looks like it might be going sideways. Like they need ball handlers, they need players who play this position. And this is a guy that they just used a first-round pick on. They have every incentive in the world to make sure that he turns into the player that they're hoping that he can be. And he's not even with the main team right now. And then to go from that to providing, real valuable minutes to the team, to play a level of defense. I think the fact that he was willing, because that Energizer Bunny kind of style that he has was getting him in trouble on offense. And I know that it's still not perfect, but the fact that he was able to say, okay, I'm going to shift that and point that towards defense. I'm going to use that Energizer Bunny energy and just frenetic just pace and all that. And I'm going to put that on the defensive end. And like under Pop, you're going to play if that's what you do. So, the decision making, all that kind of stuff. I just feel like the speed that he has, as the game slows down for him, if he continues to play with that level of speed and level of urgency, especially on the defensive end. It just, to me, I just wasn't expecting him to come in halfway through the season and start providing really valuable minutes. So I would say that to me, that's probably the second highest above expectations behind Wemby, and it's been a great surprise for the team.
Okay, I'm with you there. Above expectations, basically everything you just said, especially like you said, the fact that we saw them at summer league. Didn't play it much in there early in the season. Defense, again, that's like the easiest way to get minutes for Pop is to just play defense and show, put your most effort in there. And yeah, he's been tenacious on different ball handlers. We've seen really good players, have a tough time with him getting the ball across the other side of the court. And that's where it was the easier part for him to take Malachi's minutes. Because, I mean, like you mentioned, Malachi's defense is not quite there yet. And so Blake, that's the one thing that he has. And so obviously offense is still work in progress, but yeah, his defense is really one of the standout features for Malaki Branham. I mean, for Blake Wesley right now. All right, last player amongst the young players, Dominick Barlow, 13 minutes a night, 5 points per game, 4 rebounds, 1 assist to 0 turnovers when you round out his numbers, 1 block, 48% shooting from the floor, 43% from 3, 65% from the free throw line. When you average out his numbers, about 0 3-point attempts, so he doesn't really shoot threes, and 2 free throw attempts. What are your expectations of Barlow?
So I'm going to say above expectations, and I'm hoping that it's not colored by the fact that I just enjoy watching him play basketball. So it's I don't know, it's easy for me to maybe get sucked in because I just the energy that he plays with and the kind of bounce that he has on both ends of the court. He's going to go after every ball. And I just think, he's young, he has time to develop. I think there are still things he needs to work on, but in my mind, how he gets from where he is now to like a locked in solid rotation player is just experience playing NBA minutes. And the fact that he was an undrafted rookie who ended up being it was the first rookie, I think, that was signed from
Overtime Elite, is that
Overtime Elite?
Yeah, Overtime.
Right. And he was in a situation where he's kind of on the fringes of the roster. He's a two-way player, and a lot of the times these players can just kind of go quietly, and he hasn't done that. He's really stuck around. I'm really hoping that he is able to stick with the team long term, because I just feel like the more play he gets, the more comfortable he gets. Biased as someone who likes to analyze the team, he's a fun player to watch. So he's been above expectations in that regard. You just sometimes don't expect a two-way to have the impact that he's been able to have, even if it's not big on the counting stats or whatnot. Again, just like what we were talking about with Blake Wesley, if you have physical tools and you have a motor, you can provide something on defense, and you can provide something on the boards, and you can provide something, and that speaks a lot to Pop, even if your talent level isn't quite there yet. So I'm going to say above expectation for those reasons.
Okay, I'm with you where I'm above expectations. And for me, it's more so, we kind of know what Zach's going to do on both ends of the floor at this point, what his game is and what he brings to the team. Whereas Barlow, he brings it's something new. Like, we don't quite know exactly what to do on each end of the floor on different nights. And so it's something always new for me. Like, you don't know exactly what you're going to get from him, but it's been productive what you have seen from him. And that's why Pop even mentioned that comment when he for the second half of one of the games, when both Zach and Dominick were both healthy and available, he actually benched Zach and gave Barlow those minutes. And then when he was asked afterward, he's like, well, he's kind of earned them. He's been playing really good basketball for us. And so obviously we see the team is still being very cautious with not going over that limit of his two-way contract days, because even for Friday or what is it, Thursday at Sacramento, he's already out with the G League. So he's not really with the G League team. He's just sitting out because he can't be on the active list for so many games. So they obviously have some plans still to give him some minutes here, because they are saving his number of games on a two-way contract. And so for the last 3 players here, let's just kind of talk about the veteran players who have been in the rotation. We don't have to go super detailed. You can kind of just give me each player's ranking here, where you have their season so far. We have Trae Jones, Zach Collins, and Cedi Osman. What are your rankings for those 3 players?
So I will say, I think Cedi was probably above expectations for me, only because he was a fringe player in Cleveland. And I think they just have a lot of young talent, and I think it was only recently that he became kind of fringe on the rotation there. They just have so many players, so many good wings there. But the fact that he was able to come in and acclimate to the Spurs system, which can be hard for new players, so well, and start being valuable so quickly, that spoke a lot to me. I think that's above expectations in that regard. But I would say the other 2 are at expectations. Even with this oh my gosh, when Trae Jones became the point guard, the Spurs started looking. It's like I'm already kind of high on Trae Jones,
Yeah.
and I think not quite at that level, but it reminds me of Derek White in the sense that like to have a steady hand, to have someone who can just like calm the offense down, get the offense set up, and execute it well. That's not always the most exciting highlight play thing, but that's really, really important to a team. And that's kind of what I was expecting from him coming into the season. So I'm not really surprised that that's what he's been producing. And then just like what you said, we know what Zach Collins is on both ends of the court. I would say if I'm going to say as expected, but I could see you twisting this and saying with where he was in the preseason, they gave him this contract extension after training camp and after a couple preseason games. They really felt like they could play him next to Wemby and that would work, and then that clearly did not work when the real regular season games came around. So if you were to say under expectations, I think that would be the reason. But I think if you told me in the summer this is the player that Zach Collins is, it'd be like, yeah, well, that is the player Zach Collins is. And I think he's done a fine job in his role. Now he's the backup big, and I like his offensive hubbiness where he can kind of play off the elbows or just make the right pass. But the 3-point shooting has kind of evaded him still, and the defense I think is still it's again not a plus on that end. So I think. But I would still say his strengths are what his strengths always have been, and his weaknesses are kind of what you would expect knowing Zach Collins if you've watched him for any amount of time. So I would say as expected on him and Trae, and then above expectations for Cedi.
Okay, so I'm with you on two of the players, and one of the players I do differ. So with you there, Cedi above expectations. Really been impressive with the Spurs in the minutes that he's gotten. Trae Jones, as expected, again, it wasn't his fault that he got thrown into the backup role to begin the season. Obviously, we knew that he'd take off once he became the starter. And then Zach, I'm going to go below expectations only because I think it's a lot more injury related, because even Pop's talked about it. He hasn't got quite back to form, and we've noticed in these last few games that he just hasn't brought that productivity that he was bringing even before he got injured. So we know that obviously it didn't work out with him and Victor starting together. But even when he was at backup 5 before his injury in late December, early January, he was still being productive there off the bench, really using his post ups to bury guys in the paint and get some baskets there. Still being a really good hub, like you said there at the free throw line area, kind of just orchestrating the offense. He's really good at finding Devin Vassell, especially for different kind of back cuts. But then, like you said, defensively, he's kind of it hasn't worked out for him there. But I think the reason why I think below more so is the fact that it's that 3-point shot that evaded him that kind of made him lose that job next to Wemby as a starter. And that's kind of something he even said when that move happened, was that we're just not shooting well enough in the starting 5 for me to be there, basically. And so that's something still that's kind of evaded him. And I just feel like in terms of him being a versatile player, he kind of needs that part of his game to be a little bit more versatile out there. If not, it's just very one-dimensional, where defenses know he's just going to be at the elbow and kind of just orchestrating the offense from there, or kind of just trying to go into the paint. But again, they're going to have that ability to back off of him, which shrinks the floor for the Spurs on offense. So that's why I would say more so below. But like I said, I think a lot of it is more so due to injury. All right, so yeah, that was just a quick little check-in on how the Spurs have done through All-Star break. Again, there's like 30-something games left before the end of the season. Now, our last topic here, Collin, let's just spend a few minutes here. Let's just talk about the latest on Marcus Morris Sr. So as of Wednesday afternoon, the Spurs, they sent their injury report to the NBA. They haven't actually, I'm looking at my phone here, they haven't even released it themselves. Anyway, on the one they sent to the, actually they did. Let me just see what they said real quick as I'm reading live here on the air. No, he's not on it either. So the official, you know what? Now not with team. So they clarified it. Okay. So he's not with team, Marcus Morris Sr. So he's still on the roster, but he's not with team. So again, we do expect him to get waived, or bought out before the March 1 deadline here. So it would technically have to happen on February 28th. Let's just assume that he does end up getting waived within these next few days. I haven't got your thoughts on this. What do you think the Spurs will do with that open roster spot if they do end up waiving Morris, like we expect them to?
So it's a little bit difficult for me because I do really like the idea of rewarding Barlow's play and just allowing him to play, because now they're kind of, like you said, they only have so many games that they can have him active in. And I think that there's probably second halves where they would say, hey, like, this game isn't going for us, let's just try to roll him out of backup center and see what happens. But they're restricted because of the two-way status there. So I think that would be the most sensible move. I think that makes a lot of sense on that regard, and I think it would be a good move for them. The Killian Hayes thing is it's just interesting because he is a fellow Frenchman of Wemby, and because I do think that he has some tools that he's flashed. It just hasn't worked out for him in Detroit. And sometimes for players, it's really just all about context and environment. The difficulty there is, with Trae being as good as he has been, and now Blake Wesley's all of a sudden come up. Like, how is he going to get those minutes to like get that second chance? So I would say I think that converting Barlow's two-way contract to a full NBA contract is what I would expect to happen, and I also think it would be a good move for the Spurs.
Okay, I'm with you there. I think that Barlow's the player that they're going to probably give that roster spot to, just because even the way that we see them right now saving his games by having him out on certain nights. Is like a little bit of a hint there. So I do expect Barlow to get that spot. Regarding Hayes and even like a player like James Bouknight, the fact that it's already been now like a week or two since they got waived and nobody's picked them up, I just don't feel like there's like a lot of teams, have interest in those players. So that's why I don't feel like right now it looks like the Spurs are one of those teams that are going to try to sign one of those players if they end up waiving Marcus Morris. But again, we'll kind of see what happens with Marcus Morris. Right now, he's still, as of Wednesday evening, he is still on the Spurs' roster. All right. Thank you to Collin for joining me here on this episode of the Spurscast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, rate, and review on YouTube and your favorite podcast apps. This episode was written, recorded, and produced by Paul Garcia. From all of us at Project Spurs, stay safe and have a great day.